So a Canadian couple goes to the US for their vacations. They're at the Miami airport to return to Canada. They were dressed up in like really heavy coats and mittens and scarves and winter boots, like ready for the Canadian winter when they arrive back home. So there was another American couple there and they looked at them with amazement and they says to the other, okay, I wonder where they are from. The husband tells the wife, go and ask them. So the wife goes over and asks them where they're from. And the man answers, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. The wife goes back and then her husband asks like, well, where are they from? And she says, well, I don't know where they're from, but clearly they don't speak English. So this was one of the two favorite jokes that I have about the Canada. The second one I will tell at the end. So Canada is kind of like this super polite friend who is also a little too comfortable with weird traditions. On the surface, it looks like wholesome, nature-loving country where people drink maple syrup and take moose rides. But when you dig a little deeper, you understand that Canada is kind of wild. Like, where else can you find a jail for polar bears, a cocktail that comes with a human toe, and a little rural underground city where people just live their lives like it's completely normal? If you're Canadian, then you probably won't flinch at this, but for the rest of the world, it's gonna get really, really weird. Okay, so number one, Canada apologizes a lot, like a lot. So let's start with the most Canadian thing ever, which is apologizing. So Canadians say sorry more than they say hello. It's like practically a reflex. You bump into someone, you say sorry, someone steps on your foot, you both apologize at the same time, and then you get stuck in a vicious cycle of these mutual politeness. But Canadians don't just stop there. They have to apologizing so seriously that they actually have to pass a law, like an official written into legal text, a government approved law called the Apology Act. Yes, because here's the thing, in most countries, if you apologize in a legal situation, that can be used against you as an admission of guilt. So imagine that someone rear ends your car and your immediate Canadian reaction is, oh my gosh, like really sorry about that. Like boom, suddenly it's your fault, even though the other person rear-ended you. So Canada had to step in and say, okay, look, we get it. Our people can't really help themselves. So let's make sure that their extreme politeness doesn't land them in jail. And you know, like the weirdest thing is that even in hockey, which is a sport where fights literally happen like mid-game, you can still sometimes catch players apologizing while punching each other. So yeah, in Canada, saying sorry is legally protected. Yeah, I don't know if that's hilarious or that is terrifying. Number two, and that is the cocktail that comes with a real human toe. So let's get into this. So picture this, you walk into a bar in Yukon, order a drink, and the bartender casually drops a mummified human toe into your glass. That is not an accident, and that is not a way to poison you. This is the Sourtoe Cocktail, and it's actually a national tradition. This is how it works. So you order the drink, the bartender brings out an actual human toe. Yes, it's a real dehydrated, blackened, terrifying human toe. They plop it into your drink and then they recite the official rule. You can drink it fast, you can drink it slow, but your lips must touch the gnarly toe. And if you're thinking, sure, they just keep reusing the same toe forever. Well, no. Over the years, people have accidentally swallowed the toe, sometimes stolen it, and sometimes even tried to bite it. So new toes really get donated. Yes, I mean donated. That means that there are like Canadians out there living their normal lives who one day decide, you know what, when I die, I want my big toe to go to the good people of the Sourtoe Cocktail Club in Yukon. The best part is that the bar actually charges a fine if you swallow the toe, which is like $2,500. Yes, someone did this enough times that they had to really make a rule about that. Okay, that freaks the hell out of me. Number three, and that is a little bit more wholesome, which is Canada has a jail for polar bears. Yes! You know, most countries have prisons for, you know, like criminals. Canada has one for evil polar bears. Well, I'm joking, but not fully. So in Churchill, Manitoba, and that is actually a town that is so accustomed to polar bear visitors that the locals leave their car doors unlocked in case someone needs a quick escape. Facility actually officially known as the Polar Bear Holding Facility, but everyone just calls it like the Polar Bear Jail. This isn't your typical jail with like bars and like bunk beds. It's like a former military aircraft hangar, which was now retrofitted to hold up to 28 bears in individual holding cells. Some cells even have air conditioning because apparently when polar bears need climate control. So what gets a beer locked up? Well, when one of these like a 1,000-pound furry little troublemakers start wandering into the town and going through garbage or giving locals a little too much of a National Geographic experience, the Polar Bear Alert program swings into action. So officers first try to scare tactics like loud noises or cracker shells or rubber bullets to convince the bear to, like leave peacefully. But if that doesn't work, then they set up like traps and capture the offender, and then they haul it off to the bear jail. So once locked up, the bear isn't really fed, not really because the Canadians want to punish the bears, but because during these months without ice, the polar bears naturally go without food. The goal is to make like jail so unpleasant that the bear decides breaking and entering into the town of Churchill isn't really worth it. And this is where I have so many questions. Like, do the bears have like criminal records? Like, is there a file somewhere on like the Barry, the white polar bear repeat offender known for breaking into backyards and terrorizing the trash bins? Is there like a parole board for bears, like some poor Canadian park ranger sitting at a desk like saying, okay, Mr. Fluffington, you served your time, do you promise to stay out of town and not cause any trouble? Are there like any repeat offenders? Like one bear gets out and then immediately goes like, screw it, I'm gonna go back in and cause more trouble. And is there like a polar bear who's like the absolute criminal mastermind of the Arctic? I don't know. I need answers. This is so interesting. Number 4, we all know Canadians love maple syrup, but the thing is that the Canadian obsession with maple syrup is actually not a joke. You know how some countries like store gold or oil? Canada actually has strategic maple reserves. Imagine a country where people actually panic over maple syrup shortage the way the rest of the world panic over toilet paper. Like, that is how Canada works. Canada actually produces over 70% of the world's maple syrup, which means that technically Canada controls the global supply of this sticky, delicious tree juice. There is like a strategic maple syrup reserve, like the ones countries keep for oil, for example, except this one is filled with barrels of syrup locked away in case of, an emergency. And then there is this, like, the great Canadian maple syrup heist when thieves stole like $18 million worth of syrup. And the Canadian government treated it like a very, very, very serious crime because, yes, in Canada, it was a very, very serious crime. It was actually so interesting that even got turned into a Netflix series. Guess what was the title? And if you really think that Canadians just drizzle this stuff on pancakes like normal people, you gotta think again, because maple syrup is everywhere in Canadian cuisine. Like eggs, pour it on, salmon, you can marinate it, coffee, why not? Fresh snow, pack it into candy, and that is actually called maple taffy, and it is pretty big winter tradition. I can actually bet that if you told a Canadian that their house was on fire, their first reaction would be, let's save the maple syrup first. And there would be at least one crazy person who would run back inside and get to save their maple syrup, and eventually did say that it was worth it. So yeah, Canadians take maple syrup very, 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 very seriously, and I respect that. Montreal is a city in Canada, but there is another city under Montreal. Weird. So you ever hated winter so much that you just decided to move underground? Well, that's what basically happened there in like Montreal. So it's January in Montreal. The air hurts your face. The wind chill is somewhere like unpleasant, and why does my soul feel cold? You step outside and your eyelashes like instantly freeze together. I mean, you could walk to work, but that would involve like navigating sidewalks covered in like treacherous mix of ice and slush and salt-stained regrets. So what do you do? Well, people of Montreal decided that they would like to go underground. Yes, beneath the bustling streets of Montreal lies RÉSO, which is the largest underground pedestrian network in the world. Yes, a 33-kilometer, which is 20 miles, labyrinth of tunnels and shopping centers and offices and hotels and universities and even residential buildings. And when I say underground city, I don't mean like a few connected stations. No, this is like a fully functional metropolis beneath a metropolis. An entire world beneath snow. Every day, 500,000 people use this subterranean wonderland like Montreal's brutal winters instead of going through like knee-deep snow. These walkways stay on like comfy room temperatures like all year round. And while most underground spaces, when we think of them, they tend to feel like claustrophobic, this was designed to be like really bright and open and filled with natural lights. Some sections have like massive glass ceilings so you get a view of the outside world, and without like actually having to go outside in those freezing freaking winters. But here's the thing, you would think that with this level of underground convenience that people of Montreal would be soft when it comes to winter. But you would be mistaken, because despite literally having these winterproof underground civilization, these people still choose to go outside and suffer like it's a point of national pride as Canadians. Like, we're talking about a city where people like use their bicycle in minus 30 degrees Celsius, like it's nothing. The snow removal budget for Montreal is 200 million Canadian dollars. And that is actually bigger than the GDP of at least one country that I know. Down in the comments if you can guess that. There is like an entire festival that is dedicated to partying outside in freezing temperatures. It's called the Igloo Fest, like Oktoberfest. And yes, it involves drinking in snowsuits. So yes, Montreal has an underground city, but they still embrace winter like absolute Canadian maniacs. And that, I think, is the most Canadian thing ever. Crazy. So, as promised, this is my second favorite Canadian joke. A Canadian woman was pregnant with twins, and 9 months came and nothing. 12 months came and still nothing. And the woman died in her 60s and she was still apparently pregnant. The doctor opened the lady up and there were like two bearded twins inside. And they kept saying to each other, please, you go ahead first. And the other one would say, no, please, you go ahead first. That was my second favorite Canadian joke. And I leave you with it. Thank you for watching. Bye.